Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jason Fitzgerald from overthecap.com, and I'm here today just to go over the Fletcher Cox restructure that the Eagles did a couple of weeks ago. I got a couple of questions about this one because it's pretty complex, and the information on the site is probably pretty confusing as to what they did and what they didn't do. Fletcher Cox was nearing the end of his contract. He was originally under contract through 2022. He's still just under contract through 2022, but they did some kind of creative maneuvering here with some salary cap numbers to make this contract more digestible for them in 2022 and give them a lot of different options as to what they can do with him in the future if they don't want to extend him, both in 2022 and or in 2023. That might leave them in a little bit of a better position than they were in before. So I know everybody wants to kind of look at these numbers here, which are kind of eye-popping. You don't need to look completely at those numbers. I'm going to try to explain the way that this deal actually works because it's not as easy as a typical contract. So let's just pull up the numbers here. So this was his original contract that I recreated right here. And by original, I don't mean his original deal. This deal has been restructured like 8 million times over. So what you had here is someone who was under contract for 2021 and 2022. His 2023 is a void year, and 2024 is completely void of all kind of cap charges or anything else. So originally he was set to count on the cap for about 23.9 million and 23.8 million. It was going to be 37 million dead once the regular season started because this paragraph 5 was then going to become guaranteed, as well as the roster bonus he earned earlier in the year. Next year, the cost to cut him was going to be 13.154 million, and then you would have, if he played next year, he would play on a cap charge of that 23.8 million, and then he'd have 6.5 million dead in 2023. On the new contract, what they did here was essentially two restructures at once. And really what Philadelphia, who had cap troubles earlier this year and still kind of does have cap troubles, and next year was right around, I think, the salary cap kind of limit numbers for what they would be. They basically went in there and they proactively approached this as multiple restructures all done at once. And what this did for them is it created a lot of cap space now while also giving them flexibility in the future. So there's a couple of scenarios that we'll look at here. But first, let me just explain what they did. So what they first did here is they took his paragraph 5 salary. They reduced it from 15 million to the bare minimum, basically 1.075. And they paid him all that amount in the restructure bonus right here, whatever that totals out to be. To basically add up to this 15 million plus the fact that he was going to get a 17th game check. So that's baked into these numbers here. That wasn't there originally. So his cap charge drops to 12.9 million. The dead money is essentially the same, 37.9, 37.034. The only difference between the two is that extra game check, which I'll just explain it right here. You get a 17th game check, 882, 353. That doesn't count on the salary cap. It counts as a benefit, but if you restructure a contract the way that the Eagles did here, basically you have to get the player his 17th game counting on the salary cap so he can get paid that. So that was essentially what they did here. So the first thing they did is they did this basic restructure, and so that's pretty standard. That shouldn't be very confusing. What gets confusing is here. So what the Eagles did is they took his $16.1 million salary plus the 17th game check that would be there. They took that number and they basically converted that into an option bonus. And the option bonus prorates also over 5 years. So you can see they added void years in 2025 and 2026 to maximize the proration they can get on these because you can only prorate up to 5 years. So you can see the option bonus proration that kicks in here. So that reduces his cap charge to 14.95 million next year instead of 23.8, assuming he's on the roster. This is the number that's throwing a lot of people off. You see this 40.927, and it's a big number. It's a lot different than 13.154. But effectively, what happens here is that this option is not guaranteed. All right. We have it in the calculations because of the way that we calculate everything. This contract kind of breaks the way that we do the calculations because it's such an oddball deal. But this option bonus itself is not guaranteed. This salary is not guaranteed here. So those actually aren't guaranteed. And so we have them listed in the dead money. But in actuality, if they release him before this option is due, and the option's not due until the summertime, so it's not like those options that are due in March. They have a lot of flexibility in terms of trading and releasing. Now, they would have to release him before this stuff becomes guaranteed. These numbers here, all this stuff becomes guaranteed. I think it's on the third day of the league year. Either way, it's early in the offseason next year. But before that date, the actual dead money that's in the contract, rather than mess up my chart because I don't know where I have it linked, would be these numbers here. I'll just do it the slow way here for these three. And just do a quick sum function. So the actual dead on that is 25. That's a big number. Obviously, that's bigger than 13. But the number on that is 25. So it's not as crazy if they were to walk away. But the thing is, this contract is not actually designed, for him to walk away as a regular cut next year. So let me try and explain it. That might not be the easiest thing in the world to do, but let's see what I can do here with it and explain the reasons for why Philadelphia did this, as well as the decision kind of tree that's here. So in our scenario one, we have a player who's cut in 2022, and it's a possibility, right? He's an older player. It's probably just as likely he gets extended as he gets cut. So those options are going to be open to the Eagles. On his original contract, it was very straightforward. You were going to get a cap charge this year of the 23.879 for him to play. And then next year, you're going to have a dead money charge of 13.154.818. Now, some people would say, well, they could use a June 1 and split these charges. And the thing is, they were not going to be able to do that, because if you utilize a June 1 release, the June 1 release forces you to hold the salary cap charge from the start of the league year all the way until June 1st. And then you get your cap relief on June 2nd. So in actuality, if they were to use the June 1 on him, they would have to carry a cap charge of $24 million. If the dead money is 13.15, why would you do that? You wouldn't. So the June 1 is never a possibility in the original contract for Fletcher Cox. So again, very straightforward. It was going to cost you about $37 million over the 2 years in salary cap room. As a percentage of cap, 13.1% this year, 6.3% the next year. There was going to be nothing left in 2023. So your total is going to be about 19.4% of the cap, on those two deals. Now, on the new contract, what do we have? Well, we've got 12.916 as our new salary cap charge. So that's just a 7.1% charge on the cap, savings of almost $11 million. So it's basically a 6% difference between this number and this one. That's pretty big. Now, if we get here, well, you notice, why is this number so much less? Why is it not that $25 million? So here is the smart thing that the Eagles did. By pre-negotiating this restructure, what they did is they opened up the possibility now to June 1 him. Because while we're here, it was going to cost you $24 million to do the June 1 during free agency. That's no help. Right now, the charge for them is only going to be 14.9. And I'm not actually even sure how the NFL would treat an option bonus like that. Probably they would include it in there. But if they were to release him as a post-June 1 cut on like the first day of the league year, so before any of these salaries here become guaranteed, any of these couple salaries in gray become guaranteed, the Eagles would just carry a 14.946 charge. Those numbers would split on June 2nd to where your actual dead money is just these two numbers right here. So you create the cap room that you need to sign your rookie class. So, on that day, you free up the extra, whatever that would be, 5 million or so, that you have baked into those numbers. So that's another way that you want to look at this. So they would June 1 him now. Wasn't allowed to do that before, the way the contract was structured. So you'd have a net savings of 3.5 million. So over the 2-year period, you'd have a net savings of about $13-14 million here. About 14, I guess, over that 2-year period. And you can see as a percentage of the cap where that is. So what they've done is you're deferring it to 2023, where the charge went from 0 because they couldn't use the June 1 to now you're pushing 15.4 million into 2023. But 2023 is the year that the salary cap is expected to increase significantly. So right now we're using an estimate of 225 million. So you can see here that's going to take up about 6.8% of the cap that year. And so if you put this in, if you look at it, it's really a net savings over this period when you look at what the charges are now going to be as a percentage of the salary cap. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, people bring up a trade. Okay, well, what would happen if you traded him prior to June 1st? So again, this is exactly the same as above. And on the new contract, this is a little bit different. So now you run a scenario where it's not as advantageous, but you still are actually going to come up a little bit ahead. And you'd be a lot more ahead if it wasn't for the 17th game check, but that is what it is. But you can see, again, you get the cap savings here. Now, while you're going to get that 25 million hammered on you here, if you have to trade him prior to June 1st, it's about 5.7% that you're losing, on the cap. You're going from a 6.3 charge to a 12. You save 6 this year. Again, you do have a slight savings overall. Let's just highlight these real quick. I'll put them in green. So you can see this is all a net positive in terms of what the money is, what you can do with the money that you're creating by deferring charges to the future. Now, they don't have to trade him prior to June 1st. It doesn't really change, again, the decision on this. This roster bonus was exactly the same. Because this option bonus isn't due until the summertime, they basically have until the start of the regular season to trade him. And if they trade him, this option becomes the responsibility of another football team. So they would actually have it open to them to trade him in the summer, identical to what they had here. And, so the trade doesn't have to be done prior to June 1st either. You can basically make it mimic this entire scenario right here by doing a summertime trade. And while most of the time you do want to trade players or acquire players, I think in the early in the offseason, I think a lot of times teams are willing to do it for non-quarterbacks. Now, this is a pretty big deal, so I'm not sure if they would acquire or not in this case. But that's just to show that the trade possibility is still open. In the third scenario, and this is again where things get pretty cool, I think for Philadelphia, where it's creative, and this is one of the reasons why I say that they're one of the more creative teams in the league, this is how it would have played out. So you would have had the 23-9, 23-8, right? This are our original charges. And then he would have left you at 6.5 million when the contract voids and he becomes a free agent. This is all assuming that there's no extension that's done. And you'd be paying a total of 54.1 million on the cap. As a percentage, you'd be at 13-1, 11-4, and 2-9, so 27-4. If you added those up there. Now, if you want to get to here on the new deal, we've got the 12-9 and the 14-9. So these are big savings, right? We're at a savings of almost 11. We're at a savings of, what is that there? 8-8, I think. So you have pretty good savings here. And these numbers, as a percentage of the cap, 7-1, 7-2. So you got a savings of 6, savings of 4.2. You're clearly making out significantly better here. you get to the void. So this void hits and this is locked in. What they did here, let's go back up to this one. What they did here is, again, they got creative. They put in a bogus paragraph 5 salary. And what they did is they put in a little clause that basically says, all right, you know what? If he's a member of the Philadelphia Eagles on like the 5th day of the league year in 2023, he earns a $52 million future guarantee or $51 million future guarantee. It's something like that. So basically what that is, that the Eagles used this past year with Alshon Jeffrey, and I think it was Curry, I think was the other one that they did that with. And what this creates is a scenario where they're getting a cap charge here of 11.18 and deferring 16,912. That's the cap charge the following year. So basically what they're doing is they're taking this dead money that would have existed. It's all this dead money. And they're going to split it up now, because now they're allowed to use the June 1st on him. And this gives them the ability to take some money and put it in 2023 and take some money and put it in 2024. So they'll carry him at 11.188 million until June 2nd, at which point this number will drop off. That's kind of meaningless, but it'll drop off and they'll get a little bit of relief that they can use for whatever. And they'll take these charges and they'll worry about them in 2024. So this is not a traditional void like this one, where they're not really going to be able to do that trick. This one is structured to use the June 1 trick to your benefit. So if you watch how that plays out, you would take a salary cap charge of 14,946,820. It's actually a little bit less than that because you're going to lose the 1.5 salary. So let me put that in. I didn't put that in there. Let me just make sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I have that in the wrong year. Let me see. I may have taken it out in this next one. Let's see. I just want to make sure. Yeah, that's correct that way. So that's what it'll be after the fact. So you'll take a cap charge of 11.188 million in 2023. You'll actually hold an extra 1.5 on that. I don't know why I didn't add that in. But during the off season, you'll be an extra 1.5 million on that. So you'll take a dead money charge of 11.188 million. That's only $4.7 million worse than where you started. And then the big one that you're going to take is in 2024. But again, the salary cap should be so high at that point. I've got the number at 240. Could be a little bit bigger, could be a little bit smaller. But again, it works out here to where, okay, that's going to take up 7% of your cap, and obviously you're losing. But over time, if you look at this as like a time value kind of proposition, they make out significantly better because they can use this June 1 and they can keep pushing money to when it's less meaningful. So savings is 6%, savings 4.2, lose 2.1, lose 7, it's a net 1.1. So this is actually the optimum scenario for them from a salary cap perspective. This would be the worst one. This one's decent. This one's pretty good. And obviously, you can look at things they could do with those savings, but I think it's pretty clear that Philadelphia already did things with those savings. So where this is the big year where you get this huge amount of savings, a 6% on your cap, 11 million total, you have two options. Your options are to use it this year or to carry it over. And they basically used it this year. And in a sense, probably next year as well, because they did sign two players to pretty big contract extensions. The tackle, their offensive tackle, Milota, and Sweat, I think, was the other one who signed. And if you look at the things that they did here, let me just put in some of the numbers here. So the original cap charge was this for one of them. I think that's Milota's deal. And the new cap charges are this. So they're going to pay over the next 2 years for him an extra $6.372 million. And the other deal was originally $106,938, and I think this is the charges if I have them written down properly over here. $12 million. So for those two players, they'll spend an extra $12 million in cap charges, which, if you go back to here, is basically what you save this year. So essentially, you're coming out on a net neutral by doing this. You were able to extend those players without impacting your salary cap situation negatively in any way, shape, or form, simply by doing this type of restructure. And they've left themselves in a better position if they have to cut him next year. Probably not if they have to trade him. A little bit better. It depends on the timing of it. I would think that a trade is probably the least likely of the scenarios, but you never know. But I would say, as you look at this here, they get those two players in for this number. They have better position next year as well with that contract and more flexibility. And they now have the ability to defer most of the money in the contract to 2023 and 2024, which is very clearly when the Eagles' salary cap situation should be much better, as well as the salary cap situation around in the NFL. So a pretty unique kind of restructure, pretty complicated restructure. It's very old style in what's done, but the concept behind it is really new and it's really unique as a option for basically having a lot of outs in a player's contract and having the most flexibility with the salary cap. Now you might say to yourself, well, then why in the world did he do this? Like, why would you make this so it could be a little bit of a better situation for the Eagles? And, the reasons for that, there's a couple. So number one, he has a chance to get money now guaranteed if he's on the roster early next year. He didn't have that leverage before. This salary cap charge was probably going to push towards a cut. There's now plenty of time for him to have the potential to stick on the roster at this kind of cap charge, especially because it's more advantageous from a salary cap perspective, probably for them looking at this as a 4-year than it would be as a 3-year deal. 3 years of cap hits. And you have a better payout schedule. You've got this money coming early. You've got this money guaranteed. So there are some benefits. It's different than the other deals they did, which I think were much more just like, pretty much like you should do good by us because, we'll do good by you at some point in the future. And it really didn't impact those players one bit. They were just kind of like a side piece and a little bit of a negotiation there. Whereas this one can actually benefit Cox in some way, shape, or form. But hopefully this explains a little bit better the different ways that they can tackle this contract and what the net salary cap impacts would be when it comes to this. But in general, they're going to be in a better salary cap position. They already were able to use the money. They were able to get two guys locked up. You can argue with the values on the deals. I would say one was probably good value, but a bit risky. The second one, I think, was a lot to kind of pay, given the track record. But he's a good player, and you expect a lot more from him now that they're going to up his playing time and everything else. So, those are what they are. But I think when you look at this, you're seeing one of the unique things that's being done in the NFL, and this is why the Eagles remain one of the best, really, when it comes to the contracts, the contract manipulation, the rules, the creativity. I don't think there's anybody better than Philadelphia in that regard. There's probably people who are better at the actual numbers that come out in the contract, but I think in terms of creativity and everything else, you won't find a better group than Philadelphia. And if Philadelphia actually gets a good team on the field versus really what they have right now, they would be scary, I think, just from a contract perspective, because they have ways to manipulate this stuff that's better than everyone else. And even though they're introducing stuff to the league that I'm sure will get picked up on, they'll find different angles to utilize in the future. And they're always going to be a year or two ahead of the curve with the stuff they do. But anyway, hopefully this explains that contract a little bit more. If you have any questions, you can email me, jason@overthecap.com, or you can contact me on Twitter, Jason@Jason_OTC, or I guess leave something in the comments here on YouTube. So everyone have a great day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.